So it's one of the most common questions I get. How do I negotiate when the other side has more power? If you've ever found yourself in a David and Goliath negotiation quandary where you are the David and they are the Goliath, this video is for you. That means if you felt like all the leverage in the hands of your moody and irascible boss, or the only decent and affordable daycare provider within 50 minutes of your home, or that arbitrary airline agent on the other end of the phone as you try to rebook your canceled flight, or your in-laws as they declare what you'll be doing for Thanksgiving, then stick around because this video is for you. I'm Bob Bordone. I'm the founder of the Cambridge Negotiation Institute. I'm a former professor at Harvard Law School, and I founded the school's Negotiation and Mediation Clinical Program. Currently, I'm a senior fellow at Harvard Law School as well. In this video, I'm going to give you 5 tips that you can use today to help you negotiate even when you feel that you are lacking in power. If you stay to the end, I'm going to share a story on how to completely transform how you buy or lease a new car. So let me start by giving you a working definition of what I mean by power negotiation. Because if you read the negotiation literature, honestly, there's a bunch of really complex definitions of power that actually aren't all that helpful to a normal person. A lot of them just drive me totally crazy. So I'm going to give you the definition that Roger Fisher, who wrote Getting to Yes and who basically founded our whole field, used. And it's a really simple one. Power in a negotiation is the ability to persuade. Period. This is usable, it's realistic, and frankly, it's a really empowering way to think about power in a negotiation because it leads to my first really important point, which is in a negotiation, you need to adjust your attitude. You actually have power in every negotiation, and that's because power is really relative. For example, the United States has a huge amount of global military power, but when it's in a negotiation, that power is limited because just by dint of being in the negotiation, it means that the United States wants this other country to do something or to not do something. And it has made a decision to engage that through a negotiation, not through some other way. That doesn't mean that power is irrelevant, but it actually does mean the smaller and weaker nation actually has power in that negotiation. And that's the same for you in any negotiation you find yourself. If the other side is at the table, it means they want you to do something or not do something. And they've decided that the way to accomplish that is to sit down and negotiate with you. And so that means you have some real power here. This mind shift, honestly, is super important because if you think you're powerless, you lose hope. And if you don't have hope, you aren't going to do much negotiating. So if you're at the table, if they're at the table, you have some power. Second point. Research standards of legitimacy. So this really relates to preparation. Because one of the best ways to enhance your negotiation power is to be better prepared they are across the table. But particular on really knowing what are the criteria, what are the standards, what are the norms that are relevant. So let me give you a story that has a huge power disparity and tell you how researching criteria or legitimacy made a big difference. One of my colleagues some years ago had a son. Actually, he still has a son. But the son turned 16. And at the age of 16 in Massachusetts, you can get a driver's license. And so his son did this. And my colleague, who was very concerned about his son possibly drinking and driving, decided that his son would have a curfew of 10 p.m. This led to major family dispute. In fact, father and son stopped speaking. Poor mom, at some point really frustrated, gave the son this book called Getting to Yes. I think I referenced that a few minutes ago and said, hey, your dad teaches from this, maybe you can learn something. So fast forward, I would say about a month later, son comes back with an Excel spreadsheet. On the Excel spreadsheet were the names of all of his friends, name of parent or guardian of all the friends, curfew time of all the friends, phone number of parent or guardian, signature. Turns out the kid got his curfew changed to 11:30 p.m. Now, what was going on there? Well, clearly, right, all of the power was in the dad. The dad was the decider here. But the research, the legitimacy that showed that the dad was way outside of the market for curfews for 16-year-olds actually persuaded him. And that's because most people, not everybody, but most people actually care about being seen as fair. And if you can show them by using outside standards of legitimacy that what they're offering simply doesn't fall within the market for fair, they will shift. Okay, third, making normative arguments around morality or justice or bringing in other parties can really help level power imbalances. So, if a landlord isn't keeping an apartment habitable, a tenant obviously can look to some objective criteria. But in some situations, right, we just might not have that for any number of reasons. There are still ways, however, that a low power person can increase their influence or power at the negotiation table, especially when that powerful party is abusing their power. So, in many local TV news markets, there's an investigative reporter, and their job is like to look into some situation where maybe a big business is taking advantage of some regular citizen because that regular individual, maybe they're elderly or they don't have much education or time or resources. They're lacking the power and they're susceptible to abuse. In many of these stories, the culprit isn't breaking the law, they're just engaging in some kind of exploitive or immoral business practice. So, bringing in the TV investigative reporter actually is the third party who exposes the immoral behavior and shifts the power dynamic. So let me give you an example that I use in my negotiation classes. Take a look at this picture right now. I often show this picture to my students and I say, who has more power here? Is it A, the police, or is it B, the men who have I am a man signs, or is it C, it's more complicated than that? I suspect that most of you would agree with my students that they say it's more complicated than that. And that's true because actually in this particular moment, as you look at this picture, it's pretty clear that in most respects, the police have more power. They have these fierce dogs, they have these big guns, and they have those fire hoses. The protesters have pretty much nothing. On the other hand, when we look at this, we know who's going to actually succeed in the long haul. And that's because the normative power of justice, of equality, and the use of the media, and even of this image you're looking at, is literally changing the power dynamic. And you can bring that to bear in your negotiations as well. So fourth, right, improve your badness. So just to remind you, a BATNA in negotiation is your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. In a negotiation, the person who has more power is usually the person who has a better BATNA, right? Because they don't need to reach a deal. And you'll remember from some of the earlier negotiation videos that I've posted here and that you should look at if you haven't seen yet, that I urge you to negotiate not from the perspective of BATNA or who has more power, but rather from the perspective of meeting underlying interests, yours very well and your counterparts as well. But when we're in a negotiation and we feel that the other side is using all their power, it's often because they're not focused on interest, they're focused on their BATNA. And so what that means is I need to do all I can to improve my own BATNA. So let me give you an example from my coaching practice. Some years ago, I was working with an executive at a big publishing house, and she was a seasoned veteran. She had been at this publishing house for many years. She was really well respected. She had published some amazing books. But she reached out to me because even though she had been there for many years, many of her peers had gone on to be senior executive editors, sometimes publishers of imprints, and she felt like she was pretty much stagnating and she wanted some help. And we talked through all sorts of negotiation strategies. And then I finally asked her how she thought the others in the organization had done, at least from her perspective, better than she had. And one thing came through. Every single one of those people had gotten an offer from a competing publishing house and then used it to get an internal promotion. Now, if I were coaching the publishing company, I would say this is really not a great way to incentivize your own employees. You're incentivizing your employees to spend time basically getting an offer externally so that they can get promoted internally. What you really want them to be doing is being creative internally, just like my client was. But I wasn't coaching the publishing company, I was coaching this client. And so what I said to her is, at least here, this is a client that responds to better BATNAs. This is a publishing company rather, that will respond to another offer. So if you want to succeed here, you need to spend the time and energy to get a competing offer, which is exactly what she did. Last point I have for you today is consider how you can change the structure of the negotiation, either the mode of communication or the time constraints or the deadlines. If you want to improve your chance of succeeding in a negotiation where you have less power, you have to think more creatively about shifting the structure of the negotiation. And I know that sounds really fancy, so let me say a little bit more about what I mean. Sometimes it's shifting the mode of communication, maybe from in-person to email or phone. Sometimes it might be changing the time constraints or a deadline to make them more in your favor. Or it could be all of the above. So let me share a real life example of how you can do that in a negotiation that almost all of us will have at least once in our life. So let me tell you about a way to fundamentally change the way you purchase a car. And let me be clear, when you're purchasing a car, all of the power is in the hands of the dealer. And the reason why is they have a lot more information about their costs than you do. You have to go from dealer to dealer. They just sit there. They can easily play good cop, bad cop. You don't really have that ability. And so you're basically kind of at their mercy unless you change the structure. So how do you do that? First, shop for the car that you like. Once you find it, you can go to a website called fightingchance.com. And for just about $40, you can get a whole bunch of information that tells you the dealer's invoice, that tells you how much each option costs them and what they're charging you. And you use this to, at the end of a month, create a letter. And in the letter, you tell them that you're going to buy a car on this date with these options and with this color. And then you tell them, I know what the manufacturer suggested retail price is, and I also know what you paid. And you put all those numbers in there. And then you tell them that you're sending it to that dealer and to, let's say, 7 other, let's say, Jeep dealers in the region, and that you are accepting offers, and you set a deadline on June 30th at 6 p.m., and that you are going to take the best offer, that you'll come in and you'll then buy the car. This may sound crazy to you, but it's extremely effective. In fact, I've done it 3 times, and every single time I got the car below invoice. And the reason why is I've leveled off the information asymmetries because I said to them, I have the same information you do. I've changed the communication mode. I've taken good cop, bad cop away, and I've turned this into an auction. The other thing here, right, is that there are a set of car dealers who will actually sell a car at a loss at the end of the month to get one marginal extra sale because they'll get rewarded by the manufacturer. So what seems like a low power situation, I have flipped into a high power situation. If you want to learn more about how to be a great negotiator, please watch the How to Improve My Negotiation Skills video that is on this channel. And of course, like, subscribe, and hit the bell. And if you want to learn more about how to increase your power in a negotiation, I urge you to keep on watching videos here or consider taking a course that I teach through the Cambridge Negotiation Institute. I'm Bob Bordone. Thanks for watching, and let's keep negotiating together. Here's the video. Click it.